Bringing your fertility plan into the 21st century. That's our topic in this episode of Calibrating Your Agronomy. Hey there, welcome to another fantastic rendition of Calibrating Your Agronomy. I've got Clint Freeze, I've got Jared Cook, and I got Mike Evans, the Calibrated Agronomy team. And we're talking about your fertility plan and program. Is it up to date? You know, we've got new technology, we've got new practices, we've got a new scrutiny on our fertility practices in agriculture. And you really got to look at what you're doing and ask. And these times economically, where commodity prices are down, are you getting every bit of bang for your buck on your fertility program? Are you over applying? Are you front loading? Are you missing out on a window of fertility application that could give you huge returns during the middle or later part of the season? That's what we're covering with the guys here. And you know what? I'm just going to point out here, I believe that there's more scrutiny going to be on agriculture moving forward than there has ever been. We're going to end up having nutrient plan requirements. I live in Northeast Indiana. I've been hearing about the phosphate loads in Lake Erie for more than 20 years because of over application of phosphates that got into the waterways and created an algal bloom in Lake Erie. Look at what's going on in Iowa, the most agricultural state arguably in the union, and there's scrutiny about fertility and overusage of fertility application that's getting in the Des Moines River watershed. This is a real thing. Is your fertility plan up to date in the 21st century? Are you doing things right? Are you also doing things that are economically the most feasible? That's what we're covering here. So I started that off. Jared, give me a synopsis here. Am I right? Are we going to see more scrutiny on our fertility programs in agriculture?
Absolutely. It's already happening. Look at some of the challenges that are hitting California, Chesapeake Bay. You know, a lot of these areas are already being looked over with a fine-tooth comb and a magnifying glass. So it's imperative that we get up with the times and consider for ourselves, our own operations, how willing are we, or how easy can we adapt to some of the regulations that might be coming our way.
What's the problem, Clint Freeze? You're over there in Illinois. You know, you're an agricultural guy. You're a generational farmer. You've been around this since the time you were born. What's the problem with our fertility? I say there's been a history of over-application, and we're going to hear from Evans. Evans' boss on the Garrett Land and Cattle front, Kelly Garrett, says, you know what? I think we've always especially on great soils like you have prairie soils in Illinois and Iowa, we've always overused fertility because it was cheap insurance to make sure we got the yield.
Yeah, absolutely. I think from a logistics perspective, a lot of fertilizer goes on in the fall, and I think that's okay for a portion of your fertilizer to be base rated there. But as a whole, we're feeding 6 months before a crop's even growing. And, you know, think about it from a human perspective, trying to feed yourself in advance. It doesn't work too good. One, you apply fertilizer and it goes into soil solution. It's usable by the plant, tie-upable in the soil with other minerals, or it's leachable. It can move up or down in the soil. So a lot can happen when you base apply in the fall. And we're all about base rates, but I think we're putting all of our eggs out in the fall, and we really need to move some of that to in season.
Mike Evans, first off, the history of fertilizer over application, it's real. I think that maybe we don't want to admit it, but I think it's right up there with, a lot of sins against our soil that unfortunately we still do. I think there's still too much fall tillage. I think there's still erosion, and you and I've talked about it. When you showed a picture of a guy down the road in the hills of Iowa where the sediment was filling up a ditch. That guy blames the weather. He doesn't blame his practices for why he has this erosion problem. He says, "Oh, well, he didn't count on this kind of weather." Well, that's not where the blame should be placed. History of over application. You've been in retail. You started your career in ag retail. It's not in the retailer's interest to tell a person that wants to throw a bunch of stuff out there in October not to.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the retail business and was an applicator and did the precision ag. You know, it was base rate, flat rates, and spread the whole field. And then we started doing VRT back in the whole late 80s, early 90s was kind of the first initiation of that. And we were doing a lot of VRT spreading, was placing it right. And we thought that was a great option back then. And it was being more site specific with where our fertility was going. But we're still, like Clint says, putting it out in the fall, putting all this huge load out in the fall. And it creates some issues of season long nutrient needs for the plant. So I think there's a lot of rethinking we need to do when we're doing our fertility plans and be more proactive about how we're handling it.
All right, let's talk about recommendations. Since we'll stay with you, one of the things here is there are still you're the experts. I'm not. It seems to me there's probably people that are in ag retail. There's probably farmers that are willing to just take old recommendations. And I mean old recommendations, meaning doing it still the same way that it was done 10, 20, or 30 years ago. And with the technology and the science that we have, it seems like you're missing out on, a big opportunity. Are we still falling? Are we still falling for old recommendations?
Yeah, to some degree. I think we, as humans and generally, the easy button's the easy one to push, right? Things get busy, get crazy, and you're just like, well, let's do what we did last year. And it happens a lot. I mean, we talk to guys all the time, and it's like, you talk to them in the combine, they're like, well, the fertility guy called me, and so, what do you do? And he's like, we're just going to spread that 80-80 we spread last year on it, and it's just the fallback of things are busy and things get in the way, and you just hit that button and move on, and you go, I'll do it next year. And it just never seems to, very few get caught up in that habit. Really, it becomes a habit. And even the retail people, I get in that habit too at times. So it's a human thing. But nobody's fault, but we need to be a little more proactive and look at things in a different light. Because I'd rather be more proactive, telling guys what we're doing versus being told what to do.
Jared, I look at the seed is better, the technology is better, the planters are better, the sprayers are better, the applicators are better, our science is better. So why are we still doing things? It seems to me that now more than ever, the tools are available to us to really change it up. Is it just the easy button, like Evan says?
Absolutely.
Okay, so what's your recommendation to the person that says, all right, you know what, I'm you're calling me out. This sometimes it's kind of like a coming to Jesus moment. Like, all right, you're right. I'm doing things the way I did 20 years ago, and there's no reason for it because every tool that I have is modern. What's your advice?
I think growers need to pick one thing that they can improve on each year. Just take one thing. If I can improve my phosphorus management, let's focus on that and just continually strive to get better with one thing each year. And that puts you on an upward trend of progress. Continuing to do the same thing over and over and over, that's the definition of insanity, right? Mm-hmm. We always get the same result. And so it's in our human DNA, I believe, to get better, to progress, to become more than what we are today. And so I think we just got to prioritize maybe a weakness on the farm and search it out. Be a student of the crop, be a student of the land, and make progress. That's what we're here for.
Clint Freeze, which thing do you think allows us the biggest opportunity to change up our fertility plan and bring it into the 21st century? Is it, okay, the seed, I think, is the seed. I'm guessing you're going to say it's either technology in the cab or it's just the understanding of the science. Which thing is going to allow us? Which focus area? Using Jared's thing, one thing. Tell me which one place where should I start modernizing my fertility plan first?
I think it's using learning strips. We're a big proponent of learning strips. So changing the rate of fertility and doing it in the same spot to measure the impact on crop yield. That's what opened my eyes to reevaluating my base rate fertility. And once I started doing that, I started seeing the more I crank rates up, I wasn't getting extra yield out of fall application of fertilizer. So having some variance, different rates of fertilizer and going lower and going higher and learning that, and it'll open so many doors of what really is paying the bill, like for the in-season fertility where we've kind of transitioned to.
All right, so let's go with the person that we are gearing this toward with the Calibrate Your Agronomy series is a consulting agronomist or a farmer, and they're front of the pack. They're not still. They say, you know what, I'm pretty modern on it. You guys work with a lot of different people. How many folks do you work with that believe that their fertility plan is in the 21st century, but they're missing one or two things. I'm guessing most of them. So what do you see when you walk even to a modern, pretty damn good operator? What do you look at and you're like, yeah, you know what? Here's one place where you could modernize.
I think there's we've already a lot of farmers are split shot in their nitrogen. I think that's awesome. Adds a whole nother use efficiency of nitrogen. But what we've come to realize is through SAP analysis that there's so much more to in-season nutrition than just nitrogen. So we're all about building a plan based on your environment, your soil's weaknesses of what other nutritions or weak links other than just nitrogen. So building in and thinking more than just nitrogen in a split application, I think there's very powerful.
And is that the other two big macros, or is that everything? So split strating nitrogen, yeah, hey, good. You're bringing that up to that's more modern. But you know what? Now is it P and K, or is it also while you're doing that, be thinking about this?
Well, I think for where I'm at in West Central Illinois, and as I get down into Missouri, it's sulfur and potassium. That's the next 2 weak links. I get up into Northern Illinois, it's a different soil environment. Phos is a really big limiter. That potassium isn't as big an issue. So I think really looking at letting geography and letting the SAP testing tell the story is a great place to start. We've got a good idea geographically where weak links are, but it's not necessarily a one size fits all, Damien.
Jared Cook, he just talked about varying your thing and by geography. Don't we know that better now than we did just 10 years ago?
Oh, no question. I mean, you look at how technology's advanced, the things we can measure today that we couldn't measure 10 years ago. It's incredible. I mean, look at the invent of SAP analysis, like Clint mentioned. That's new. That's new to the industry. So we've got new tools, we've got new ways of measuring. I think it's imperative we use them.
I got some on-farm data, and I'm getting that from my ops center. I'm getting that from yield maps. Where am I getting it? And then how do I apply it?
Where I've, on my own farm, where I've saved the most money and what's put the most dollars in my pocket is adding easy drops or wide drops to my sprayer. Being able to go in season and actually apply pounds to the ground. That doesn't work for every geography. We got guys that are moving into top dressing more and splitting applications that way. When fields aren't necessarily straight back and forth, that allows for that application. But I would say getting positioned as a farmer to do some sort of in-season nutrient application is important.
Mike Evans, using on-farm data, and then Clint just talked about using wide drops and then fertility through the season. We over at Extreme Ag work with a couple of fertility companies, and that's been a big learning thing for me. You can spend the same amount of money and you can put the stuff out there and get bigger bang for your buck. Is that data driven, or is that just changing of practices?
I think it's both. It starts with the data, and then you learn different practices. Just like some of the guys we consult with in the local area, Kelly being one of them, and a couple other guys is, we went the more foliar route. We can't wide drop like Clint can. The topography just doesn't allow us to, but we've been able to use SAP analysis and rapid soil testing to kind of calibrate ourselves to what we need when we need it. And then we can go out there and use products that are highly efficient and put them on in a timely manner and get a good response for them. So that's kind of been our path.
By the way, he gets a gold star for dropping in the word calibrate in the Calibrate Your Agronomy video series right here. Anyway, when we said on-farm data, you just said SAP. You use SAP, and then you said another type of soil sampling. You said rapid. Is that what you said?
Yeah, rapid soil.
Okay, is that something everybody? Okay, am I the only person that's listening to this that doesn't know what that means, or is there somebody out here in Indiana listening to this that also doesn't know what you're talking about? Rapid soil sampling?
It's fairly new. I think Jared gave us the insight to it a couple of years ago.
All right, Jared, how's it work? And if we're going to talk about on-farm data, tell me about rapid soil testing, because we're going to break into the types of data that can help us make better fertility decisions to bring it in the 21st century. Rapid soil testing, SAP sampling, Evans and I have talked about. So give me rapid soil testing, and then we'll go to the SAP.
Rapid soil is a testing method that measures the soluble nutrients in the soil solution. So it's the fraction of nutrient that the plant can get today. So that the time you pull the sample, What that result shows is what access the plant will have to those nutrients.
So that means about availability, accessibility, uptake now.
Yes, exactly.
Going back to another video series that we did, you said something brilliant. I've given you accolades for that. So do me a favor. Can you say the brilliant statement again? Because, by the way, soil testing in general measures what's in the soil. Rapid soil testing tells me what's available for accumulation right now. What's the brilliant statement you said in a prior recording?
Damien, the statement was the soil is a very expensive storehouse for your nutrients.
Okay, so while we're talking about data and also bringing your fertility plan in the 21st century, why don't you just go ahead and hit that again? What does that mean? It means that traditionally people thought, go ahead and just put it out there, build up my soil. And your answer is maybe not.
Maybe not. Exactly. Think about this. We know that when you put phosphorus in the soil, phosphorus is a negative charged element. Therefore, it has the capacity to tie up or bind to positively charged elements. So iron, aluminum, calcium, even magnesium can tie up, precipitate phosphate. And so we like to use a soil testing method, rapid soil, that measures what the soluble fraction is. It tells you what's available to the plant, but it also gives you the indication of the amount of antagonism that's present. And so it kind of ices the cake over the overall arching agronomy scheme.
Who wants to take on sap sampling? Because that's something that to a lot of people is new. I mean, you guys are at the forefront. Evans, you and I did a recording about it. Sap sampling is tissue sampling next iteration because it's faster. And that's, again, if we're talking about 21st century fertility plan, I'm thinking that I should use sap sampling because it tells me what versus tissue sampling.
Sap sampling is a measurement of nutrient mobility. Majority of the industry overlooks nutrient mobility in the plant. There's 5 key elements that will move from old growth to new growth. That's nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, chloride, and actually a 6th if you include sulfur, as it's critical in the movement of nitrogen. Those elements, because they're mobile in the plant, we like to run sap analysis because sap is a comparisonal sample of old leaves versus new leaves. It allows you to categorize nutrient mobility. The other tagline here that's unique to our calibrated agronomy is when you pair rapid soil with sap analysis, there's a direct calibration between what's in the soil and what will be in the plant. It's the absolute best agronomic platform you can have to manage your fertility with. So in a nutshell, that's sap.
Plant freeze, when we're talking about on-farm data, and I know we can talk about yield maps and all that, and you're big on those things, but while we're talking about sampling, is tissue sampling yesterday? Is tissue sampling 20th century and sap and rapid soil testing is 21st century? Should I stop tissue sampling?
I think so. We have, because sap is predictive, tissue's what's happened. So have I learned a ton of things with tissue over the years? No question. And I think we all have on here. But if we want to go to the next level, sap and paired with rapid soil, it's it.
If you brought in your kid to the pediatrician and they ran tests and said, yep, your kid's got stunted growth because you didn't give him enough micronutrients in his bottle when he was a baby. Okay. What can I do about it? Oh, nothing. It's already done. Is that tissue sampling right there? I mean, the kid, is that what we're talking about?
Yeah. It's
you nod your head. The listener can't hear you nod.
Yeah. So how I always use tissue was to build a data set from the previous growing season to make a better plan for the following year, where SAP allows me to make calibrations in season, to better my crop. When I got out of school, obviously I was going to take our farm to the next level, and so we started pushing fertilizer rates and kind of going wild. And I never really moved the needle. That yield didn't go up and I was spending more money. And so through these learning strips, we would take and vary rates of fertilizer, and how I created more value eventually, after wasting money for a few years, was actually reducing fertility and getting more dialed in with the inputs that we were using. So I really think, a lot of guys that I work with are skeptical of this. And when we do these learning strips with different rates of our big spends, NPK, there is a lot to learn.
Biologicals. Are biologicals a new weapon tool, I should say, in my toolbox? Are biologicals a new tool in my toolbox to bring my fertility plan into the 21st century?
I believe so. Just through our testing and all the things we do on Kelly's and some other guys' fields. We've started, when we're talking about data just recently, we started to test for biological loads in the soil, whether that's good, bad, disease, mineralization, things of those natures. We can test for that now and get a scope of what's going on. And you learn a lot once you get your fields tested for the biological spectrum, and you can see what's dysfunctional in the soil. And so we've done that, and we've figured out we've got a pretty dysfunctional soil where we work with, and the biologicals, like we've said before, the competitive exclusion principle is a big deal. And when we can bring that into the soil with our diverse biology, we've seen really good benefits from being able to use that and being able to use what we got.
Jared, you're kind of I kind of knew about you because of you being at the forefront of biologicals. We've moved into different phases, right? It was, what is this stuff? Oh, I don't know if I believe in this stuff too. Hey, there's something real here. And then we've Evans likes to say what agronomy is chemistry and biology mutually applied, or complementarily applied, or something like that. Tell me about biologicals and how they can help me bring my fertility plan into the 21st century.
Well, I think I'm in a unique position. I mean, I've used biologicals. This will be 15 years. So 15 years ago, we started down this road when it wasn't cool.
Yeah. Barbara Mandrell, I was country when country wasn't cool. You were biologicals when everybody scoffed at you. I mean, you had to take some arrows, didn't you?
Oh yeah, we took a lot of arrows. Yep. But all along the way, we've learned some pretty awesome lessons. We've learned that we can use beneficial microbes, like Mike said, to outcompete disease. We can use beneficial microbes to free up phosphorus, to cycle nitrogen, to free up micronutrients. We can use beneficial microbes to chew up plant debris, break the disease cycle. I mean, those are the things we've learned. Biology has been super valuable for us. And now as we approach agronomy, biological inputs, that becomes a priority selection in our input selection, is we prioritize biology.
All right. Well, if I'm calibrating my agronomy, and that's why I'm listening to this, I want you now I'm going to go around the horn. I want everybody to give me an example of a biological that you've used that has complemented, accentuated a fertility program and gave you, synergistic 1 + 1 = 5 or 1 + 1 = 10. Give me an example. I'm going to go around. You've used biologicals. You're not as historically versed as our friend Jared with 15 years. Tell me a biological you used and it gave you like, holy crap, we could cut back on this and it gave us this big impact.
Yeah, I think I'd rather talk about it as a category. So it's part of Calibrated. I also run bioag management. We produce our own biological extract, and it's a pretty multifunctional, but where we've spent most of our time is in biological research. So I've tested just about every company you hear about. We have had an impact plots, and we would tissue and sap sample them weekly to see the trends versus the controls. And one thing we noticed very early on is we can measure through tissue or sap the increased nutrient flow after a biological application. And so that varies by geography from 10 to 40% by nutrients. But for sure, it can be measured. I think where the industry is getting it wrong is we want to go all biological, no fertility, or we want to go all fertility. I think it's bridging the gap and really truly understanding, hey, I'm going to get a 10 to 20% efficiency out of applying this biological. So I need to make adjustments in my base rate fertility to kind of complement that. And obviously the goal is to save money.
The big benefit you saw is in correlation with fertility, you get more flow. You increase flow of nutrients availability. And that was using a category of biological in season?
Yeah, all different ways, Damien. So like, a farmer has to acquire a bunch of ground and he's limited. We may use a biological to allow him to pull back his big spend on base rate fertility, especially on P&K for a year or two. But then we want to go back to it. Jared measures his flow through his irrigation using biology weekly to see his assisting delivery of applied nutrition. So it's multifunctional, and it could be a whole nother topic of how you can implement and use them. And because they're pretty multifunctional, but But the thing we don't want to forget, though, mineral nutrition still runs the show. Minerals are still important. It's just about the efficiency and assisting factor that biology can bring.
I think the biggest thing we've seen in our no-till environments is just using biology to help break down the residue and get the nutrition out of that residue cycled back into the system quicker. As we've increased yields, our fodder gets higher, and we're getting more debris out there. Being able to cycle that stuff and use to Clint's point, use a diverse biological profile to help break that all down and get it ready for the next season or the season after has been a huge benefit to us.
So you think the biological, the example you would give is breaking down and helping with decomposition of fodder that then makes fertility more available next crop?
Yeah, because I think it's in Neil Kinsey's book. He talks about once a nutrient's uptaken by a plant, it's 10 times more available to the next plant. So if you look at it from that perspective, there's a huge efficiency gains by just cycling those nutrients as part of your program. Obviously, you can't say like, I'm going to go spray a biological residue digester and I ain't going to be able, to Clint's point, putting mineral nutrition down because eventually you cavitate the system and you'll be behind again. So, I mean, it's a part of the whole program using it.
Yeah. So your point is, you're not going to replace utilization of applied fertility, but you're going to reduce it and also make what's out there more available. That's the big benefit. All right. Biological success story. You're the granddaddy of them all, 15 years experience. Jared.
Well, since Mike and Clint went category, I'm going product specific, Damian.
I like it.
One product that I found that has just been absolutely phenomenal for us, and here's the backstory as to why it's worked so well. Nearly all ag soils across the nation, as we go through a crop cycle, a crop year, our soils become bacterial dominant. We've got to be able to get that bacterial dominance back down into an equal ratio with fungi, protozoa, and all the other beneficial microbes in the soil. So I've really found great success with Clint's product, BioAg-E, as a means to degrade the bacterial load of the soil. He has a high fungal count, high protozoa count in his product, and that naturally allows me to manage the bacterial dominance that occurs in ag today.
I'm almost geeking out here because you're all three agronomically smarter than me, but I'm a soils guy. I get into this. We never, until 2 years ago, I never heard the term about bacteria to fungi ratio. And I'm not sure that I'm like the only guy. I think there's a whole bunch of us in ag that this is a new thing. Everybody's nodding their head. Evans, am I right about this? He just went product specific and said bio, whatever it is, E. But the main thing is correcting a bacteria to fungi issue, and somebody saying, what the hell's that got to do with my fertility plan? Exactly. Go.
Yeah. I mean, Jared was the first one that showed us that too. And talking with Clint, we've all kind of talked in the same about the bacteria fungi ratio. We did some tests and it was like, holy cow. Because like, I think you want it to 1-to-1 be perfect world. And we did some samples and it was 1,700 to 1. So, that's probably like an F- in school. So,
well, here's the thing, Jared, to key off of that, if I go from, it's supposed to be 1-to-1 bacteria to fungi ratio, and you can use a biological to correct that. Evans says they found a soil that was 1,700 to 1 heavy on bacteria. What if they apply this and they only get down to half that, 850 to 1? Did they still make headway that is visible when the combine runs?
Dude, massive amounts of headway. Because, you think about this, most of your nutrient cycling pathways in the soil all hinge off of fungal dominance, fungal presence. You want to improve phosphorus, potassium uptake, you want to improve micronutrient uptake, you need dominant fungal presence. And so the fungi in the soil, they'll prey on the bacteria. And in the process of that, as they prey on bacteria, they release nutrients, release nitrogen, releases copper, iron, zinc. Whatever that bacteria had in its cellular structure gets released back to the soil as a bionutrient. So there's ample reasons why you'd want to use a fungal dominant product to prey on bacteria. That's mineral nutrition cycling at its finest.
Is it safe to say my fertility plan is not in the 21st century if I don't have biologicals somewhere in the mix? Yes, everybody?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much everybody agrees. All right, moving on. Plant genetics. As part of my 21st century fertility plan, can't I also admit that those scientists at those seed companies must be doing something right, and I can give them a little credit and change my plan based on the fact that they've made better plants? Clint, are the plants better? Are the genetics such that I could alter my fertility plan because they've gotten a better plant, putting that a better seed, put in that seed bag?
Oh, absolutely. It's been a game changer, and it's something that we haven't went back and reevaluated the university's base rate fertility recs on NPK. As our root systems get better and we have a much better root capture area across the soil's profile, we can absorb so much more nutrients than we did 40, 50 years ago. So that in itself should trigger a relook at base rate fertility.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, genetics and seed, specifically corn seeds, come a long way in the last 25 years. It's contributed a lot of yield gains, but I think a lot of guys will at least tell me that they've kind of plateaued. And I think it goes back to Clint's point of just the efficiencies of the plant and being able to understand what the plants are needing, especially in the micronutrient world, as we have all this fertility coming into the plant, but we don't have all the micros to help do all the basic functions it needs to ingest and use that nutrient it's taken in. So I think it has played a big role. And, with the SAP analysis, when you can look at the variety specifics, it kind of helps understand what each variety is needing at different times as well. It gets a little technical and gets a little dirty, but I mean, if you look at other industries like cannabis or anything else, I don't know if Jared sees it out his way, but if you get more rifled down, they can almost pinpoint when to apply what by what variety. I mean, it is like precision at the highest.
Is one of our sins that we're applying at the wrong time, or we do what's convenient for us? We do what works for our schedule versus what the actual plant needs are.
Yeah, I think logistics is probably a major driver of fertility decision making. What's most convenient? How do I get my pounds to the ground most conveniently? And so that oftentimes is limiting in our ability to see a bigger, broader way of improving our overall enhanced fertilizer management.
A little bit of a rhyme there. Pounds to the ground. He says brilliant things. Your soil, what is it again? Your soil, what is it? It's a very expensive warehouse.
Storehouse for your nutrients. Very expensive storehouse for your nutrients. Yeah, buddy.
Tell me about how I can change the sentence, Clint. If I'm misapplying or I'm doing it based on when the co-op has my stuff or when it's easy for me, what am I missing out on terms of my fertility plan and bringing the 21st century? How do I change my timing to bring my fertility plan in the 21st century?
I think it's real simple. You just got to move your fertility to when the crop's growing. It doesn't necessarily need to be all of it, but the closer you get your application, you eliminate the storehouse. You just allow the plant to uptake what you apply. So the reason why I think strip till's gaining ground, the reason why Y drops are gaining ground, it's location specific. It's another form of fertilizer use efficiency, of putting it right where it needs to be. And everything else used to be broadcast. I think now we're learning that leaving location specific as far as getting closer to the root system is a big deal as well.
I agree with that. All right, tie it up. Evans, we prepared notes before we started this recording, and I want to get into it. What if you're not under fertilized or over fertilized? What if it's just that you are tied up, which means I'm not getting the bang for my buck?
Yeah, I think that's a lot of issues I come across though is just the imbalance of the soil in general and causes tie-up issues, whether that's cal-mag ratios or phosphorus is tied up with iron, aluminum because of other things. The pH is way low. We see a lot of that, and I think that's one thing we've focused on going into the 21st century is that soil balance. So you get the cal-mag, you get your cations in kind of an order, or can manage them in an order, because some soils you can't really fix because they're so far out of whack, but you can manage them, and that'll help improve all your availability if you can get them in a place that's good.
Clint Freeze, Is tie up a bigger problem than most farmers and even consulting agronomists realize that there's plenty of fertility out there. It's just that I can't get to it because of the something's wrong. The chemistry's not working.
Yeah, and the more data we get fed, and the the more farmers we get to work with, the more I see it. Tie up is a bigger issue that I haven't brought into consideration until the last couple of years, and there's ways to combat it. The way we're combating it locally here is moving nutrients to in season just to avoid that tie up, and let the plant uptake it. But there's other solutions that we're working on, that can break some of that products that we can put in furrow that will break and exchange, and break these loose. So biology can be part of that equation, but there's all different types of fertilizers and amendments that can break that change as well. So.
Jared, Clint just said, first off, putting more stuff up front and furrow, and then changing up the products, and then also putting fertility out more through the season. You avoid tie-ups because then I guess you're spoon feeding it along the way when the plant's using it and it doesn't have a chance to get tied up. Other recommendations: if I've got a tie-up issue, what do I do?
Well, you got to protect the nutrients you're going to put into the soil. Because the soil is an expensive storehouse, you've got to, when you do apply a nutrient, it needs to be complexed and chelated to where it can naturally withstand the antagonism that's in the soil. And so there's easy ways to make that happen. And my opinion is I don't know that our ag retail system in the nation is focusing on these technologies. I think they're just focusing on the general product, send to the farmer. They don't really care. And so
right.
The new age here, the 21st century is, let's make sure everything we're applying is chelated and or complexed to where it can withstand the antagonism.
Fixes and corrections I need to bring my fertility program into the 21st century. So let's go with Evans first. You used to work in retail. You show up at a farmer's operation, and even he's got an agronomist he's working with, and you're like, hey, I'm not insulting anybody. You guys are doing fine. You got decent yields, but I'm telling you, I think that my biggest recommendation when people are still doing things the old way, or they're not at the forefront of fertility for the 21st century, what's the one thing?
Testing is where I lean to. Using some of the testing that we do to see where you're at and look at a different light. Rapid soil is a great indicator of that. We can see, you may have a huge load of phosphorus in there, but it may be low solubility to the plant. So we got to figure out how to fix that. So that testing's where I always lean to when we start down these paths.
Clint, where you go? You show up, you got somebody, one of your customers, a bioag management customer, somebody like me, you show up at my farm in Indiana. What's the first couple of things you're going to tell me to do to update my fertility program?
Agronomy is intricate. I mean, first we're going to have a conversation. But I think my biggest, strength I've brought to farmers that consistently is moving some of the nutrition in season. That is something I'm very adamant about doing.
Okay, so Evan says sampling is you really got you've got data because you're probably misapplying, underapplying, overapplying, etc. You say in season. Figure out a way to put fertility more in season because it avoids tie up, and also it gets bang for your buck because it goes right into the plant. All right, Jared, they're not leaving you much. What's the recommendation you're going to give me if I want to bring my fertility plan into the 21st century?
I think it starts with the farmer telling me where it hurts. What are his struggles? What's his frustration? Tell me where it hurts from his perspective, because nobody knows the farm better than the farmer. And so I thrive on good, accurate insight from the farmer, and then we can deploy proper agronomy. So rather than putting the cart before the horse, let's understand what the farmer actually needs.
Do you think they know, or do you think that sometimes you got to be a real probing doctor because it's a little bit like, no, everything's fine. And you say, well, if everything's fine, why is your fertility spend here, but your yield is here? I mean, do you have to be a little bit of pushy?
You got to be inquisitive. I think every farmer has an intuitive a gut feel, so to speak, as to where some struggles are. And we just got to be inquisitive. We got to ask the right questions and pull it out of help the farmer expose what the frustration is. And then we can deploy the right solution.
All right. So I heard everything. I heard Evan says I show up at the farm, I start with sampling, I start with testing, I make sure we're utilizing the data. Then I heard about being willing to change up your fertility program in terms of timing and your application and putting it out there. And then for you say, I'm going to go with the inquisitive doctor approach and say, you tell me where it hurts, and then we can start adjusting on that. So I like it. This whole episode was about bringing your fertility plan into the 21st century. The company's called Calibrated Agronomy. The website is calibrateyouragronomy.com. The gentlemen involved are Clint Freeze, Illinois, Mike Evans, Iowa, Jared Cook, Idaho. All three I-states, but not my I-state. I'm Damien Mason from the other I-state, the one that nobody likes to say nice things about, Indiana. Anyway, the point is, it doesn't matter where they are. What matters is where you are in your journey. If you want to get your agronomy calibrated and you want to have huge success, reach out to these guys. You know what? You're on a journey. You want to get to where you're going, and you want to be profitable, successful, and have a legacy to hand on. These guys can help you. Till next time, thanks for being here. And remember, share this with somebody who can benefit from it.